I work at a company called Stash. It's a fintech company. Unlike Wilson, we have 2 million users, so it's probably 10% of the 500, but it's definitely a much more niche market and a growing market. So, and a lot of our growth actually comes from the paid acquisition side. So I wanted to share how we look at acquisition holistically and strategically, since that's a large part of our growth. We're regulated by the SEC, so a lot of the community social sharing and things that other companies can do is things that we actually have to keep our hands off of. Cool. So Stash, just a little background on Stash, was started in late 2015, so almost about 3 years ago now. 2 founders, 2 hedge fund guys quit their job and literally went out on the street and started asking why millennials weren't investing, so the sweet spot of 25 to 34-year-olds. And what they found was there was 3 main reasons. One was people didn't have enough money. 2, they found it very complicated and convoluted. And 3, that they were going to invest, but they were going to do it in the future. So that was the 3 things that they were trying to solve out the gate. And they did this through a few ways. 1, making it relatable, approachable, and affordable. And the main premise around was simplifying the process for people, breaking that barrier down. Start with $5 to get started. We'll serve them education. We have a Learn team in-house that does all content and some that we source. And then start a habit of automating those investing habits through a person's life cycle. About 90% of our customers are first-time investors, so we're very delicate in terms of how we message them. But our goal is to get them started investing, so over the long term, they learn that the market is not about timing it, but timing the market. And the company mission is really to make people's money work. We're expanding products now. The first product was Stash Invest, which is investing in ETF funds and now single stocks. But we're launching a bank in Q4. We also launched retirement accounts, and we've launched custodial accounts. So a lot of cross-selling of products now off the main app that's been successful for us. And then why are we doing this? Millennials, 79% of millennials don't invest, and they find financial services not appealing at all. 90% of Americans out of the top 10%, which most people probably find this surprising, don't have an IRA or a brokerage account, so they're not really set up for the future. They're banking on Social Security still being there, and not really planning for the future. As you know, a lot of millennials now are not buying houses, and that process for them to think about the future is just not in their mindset. And then 68% of the US workforce don't participate in contribution plans today. And the market's huge. In general, there's 320 million people in the US, and 86% of millennials have less than 100K in assets. So a lot of them are not prepared for retirement, not prepared to even start thinking about financial guidance. And there's a huge opportunity to serve that underserved market where the big guys have not tapped into yet, but are starting to, the Scottrades, E-Trades of the world. So how have we really, on the paid acquisition side, thought about strategy? I wanted to give some tips on how we think about, 1, data and the top tips that we use without going into too much details on channels, just how we think about strategy, execution, and testing consistently. First, the product itself is simple. Everything from a user perspective is simple. Simple to start. The design is very simple. The funds today exist on the market. They're curated by our investment team, and they've been renamed so people can understand them. So we have blue chips, clean and green, robotics rising, and then we just launched single stocks so people can start investing in Amazon, Twitter, Snapchat, all the big stocks out there. But everything from a user perspective is super seamless and easy to start investing and keep it as a habit ongoing. We also have products like Auto Stash, where they can invest $5, $20 a week, and that's been a big success for us. And then we've launched products, Smart Save, where we'll look at people's spending habits and start pulling from their account based on what we think they should be saving. And they can put that up and down based on feedback from the customer. The next thing we want to do for millennials is make it personable. So a lot of millennials don't want to invest because they find it boring. So we've gone the route of curating ideas around what people believe in. So a lot of people believe in the environment. A lot of people believe in, we have a lot of funds about women empowerment. We have funds for Uncle Sam, military defense, people that believe in the military. So we see this in habits not only on how they buy, but we use it from the acquisition standpoint to get customers in the door. So this is a weird slide, but I wanted to set the point that when a scalable company, I've owned an agency prior to this, and a lot of companies don't think about a foundation for scale. And what happens is, and when I started at Stash, there was an unstructured, they were running 100 campaigns named Scott's campaign number 1, number 2, number 3, and it was really confusing to pick up. So I always preach a foundation of structure in terms of how we look at data, how we test, and how to make that scalable so as we scale the team and pass it through other people in the company that we can collaborate easily. Otherwise, you wind up like this. You wind up with a house that's falling and crumbling, and you're always scrambling to figure out the next way to fix things. So here's some of the key tips that are important to think about. One, from a data and segmentation standpoint, is alignment on KPIs. So KPIs should always align to business goals. You can have soft KPIs, but at the end of the day, we're in 2018. There's enough data out there to say acquisition could tie, and any paid media should tie directly to whatever you're looking at, whether that's a sign up. We look at bank accounts, linked, funded accounts, people that auto stash, and then cross adoption rates. And then we have models built out to basically create LTVs of those customers. The next big thing, which is huge for a lot of large companies, is ensuring that you have very clean data structure. We tag everything we send out from a campaign standpoint, everything from the channel to the audience to the creative, and that's all standardized across all our channels. So Facebook, Twitter, any vendor we use. And we don't always analyze all this data, but we look at this when we need to find key areas of opportunity from acquisition standpoint, but also how do we continue that messaging through the user journey, which is super important as you scale a business and try to get outside your core audience. Then we look at customer profiles. Here's some sample models we look at. So people that have funded their accounts, active stashers, then we get a little bit more curated, like people that, green investors, people that invested in marijuana ETFs, tech personas, we have gaming personas, and we're able to curate this data on the back end, upload it to all our partner channels from a first-party publisher, and start modeling off that. And then we do this with all our partners, but we also use the publisher data at the same time, sometimes just to prospect. But once we have a large enough list, we'll use that as the seed list to basically create lookalike models. Then we start messaging them directly with those specific ads, and we'll A/B test this against our standard messaging, which is start investing with $5. And we start curating content around those personas. So people that are into gaming will start serving ads around gaming, sending them to gaming landing pages, sending them to gaming content, really to seed that audience, and then acquire them either through promotional codes or just through content itself. Then we look at all that data based on lifetime values. So here's some of the long campaign strings we use, which have all the data in it. We'll look at all the data, and then we have LTV models built out that are constantly updating. We actually have 2 LTV models to cross-check each other. And then we'll figure out, can we scale an audience and channel based on the pricing on acquisition? And if not, can we actually increase the LTV through CRM and product? So that's a collaborative conversation throughout the organization. So alignment through product, CRM, creative, acquisition, and development also. And then if we see opportunity where things are really scalable, then we'll start automating it. Here's a sample of how we look at things, and you'll see there's 6 or 7 teams involved. We plan up front. The acquisition team handles planning in terms of what segments we want to go after. We work with the creative team on creative concepts, and then we'll work with the full team on user journey mapping. Then we test and execute across channels, and I'll show a live example of this. Where we look at the acquisition channel, if we're sending them to an app download, we'll curate that app splash screen when they first open the app, or we'll send them to a landing page that's easy to develop for us. Then we have curated reg funnels, CRM series, and lifecycle messaging, and then product experiences. So we can serve up specific experiences based on what we know that user's interested in. And then we work with the data team on analyzing all that data on a daily, weekly basis. Here's a good sample. This is a partner we work with, Mint, one of our affiliates. So we have a really good relationship with them on the affiliate side. We send out a lot of emails. And originally we started testing on landing pages. We got more resources on the staff. We have about 150 people now in total. But our acquisition team is only about 2 or 3 people. We're pretty lean. And then we start curating the experience. And you can see across the funnel, we see huge lifts as we curate more. So just having a landing page that calls out Mint and clear messaging to Mint users increases 30% on conversions. Having a reg funnel that speaks to them decrease the acquisition cost. And then re-messaging users that maybe haven't funded yet but has that promo code out there, we've increased buys by 39%. So it's a collaborative effort across the funnel. And obviously, the efficiency rises greatly as you start curating these pieces. Is that the right one? No. It's an old movie, Glengarry Ross. I don't know if you guys have ever seen it, but he goes in and he's a real estate salesman, and he starts yelling at all the salespeople about always be closing. I don't yell at my team, but I always preach always be testing, ABT. And like Wilson mentioned from Pixar, we probably test, even on the media side, we probably test 50 to 100 a month in terms of new channels, geo-test, creative tests, split testing, and it looks kind of like this. We have them bucketed. So we'll do geo-test to test incrementality a lot. Incrementality in general we'll test nationally. We'll shock test channels on spend to see if that lifts our overall numbers. We'll test attribution windows, control versus exposed groups, app rankings. We'll test market saturations. We'll bring in offline media. And we've seen really good results with things like out of home in New York, taxi ads, where we can get at the right pricing and right reach and frequency. We can actually see a lift in acquisition numbers. We test in landing environments, web versus app. And then we also test creative, obviously, on an ongoing basis. So creative, copy, promo messaging, rich media versus static ads, video, et cetera. And then we like to iterate quick. Once we find those wins, we take them, we move on, and don't look back unless we're retesting a concept. And the whole idea is to keep it as lean as possible, keep it as structured as possible, and move as fast as possible, because this market changes. It's very competitive. We have huge competitors in the market. So we want to stay a step ahead, because they'll find out we're doing something, they'll copy it, and we just have to keep on iterating. So keeping it lean and structured keeps that process going extra fast. And that's kind of it. The 7 steps, just to reiterate how we look at really growing our acquisition. 1, simplifying the UX and messaging to customers. We make it as easy as possible on the back end. On the front end, a lot of work on the back end in terms of structure and foundation to make that clear to the consumer. Because if you're not structured, you might have the wrong message to the wrong customer, and it can cause a lot of issues, which we've seen in the past. Create a data-driven and structured foundation, so make sure everything is structured in terms of how you set up campaigns. Tailor those user journeys to your unique customer profiles, and I always tell people to start at the most scalable level, so it could be as simple as male versus female, and then start breaking that down. Creating consistency through that journey, so you don't need the consistency on the day 1, but you should start testing into that across the user journey and test it one by one. measure and optimize and scale based on lifetime value and buy against it, and use metrics across the funnel to understand if there's opportunity to scale an acquisition, and if not, is there opportunity to make that user base more valuable through CRM and product. Test, and iterate, and then lastly but not least, take those winnings and keep on moving. Thank you.